Welcome to the April 2026 Entrepreneurial Strategy Series session. We often call the session the ESS series. It is something that myself created about 4.5 years ago. It is to educate and empower entrepreneurs on all topics related to conception to exit and everything in between their journey. We have been putting this on the last Thursday of every month for, again, close to 5 years, and we're always looking for topics. In fact, that's how this particular topic came to light, which I'll get to in a second. My name is David Postolski. I am an intellectual property attorney. I am a patent attorney with a firm called Gearhart Law. We are what's called an intellectual property boutique, and we help people with their IP strategy, patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets, and also everything satelliting around that. And so which is another reason why this topic came up. Most of our clients are startups, entrepreneurs, and emerging companies. And some of them are making products. Some of them are doing business overseas. Some of them are importing and exporting, and some of them are manufacturing overseas. In fact, if you look at some of our older ESS sessions, you'll see topics related to some of the topics that I just mentioned. And on some of our recent sessions since the beginning of the year, this topic came up, tariffs. A lot of our clients have been and continue to face issues related to some of the new tariffs that have come. They're not even new anymore, but some of the tariffs that have been created by the current administration. And so we decided to reach out to two of our clients that have firsthand knowledge of this, and they are our featured speakers today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves first. And then we'll get into the formal presentation. We urge you to ask questions if you want, whether it's live or if you have any questions when you view the recording, just reach out to us and let us know. And so I'm going to start. I want our first speaker, Sherrill Mosee, to introduce herself. Sherrill, maybe you can just take a moment, maybe not get into tariffs yet, but maybe take a moment to more than a moment, take a few minutes to introduce yourself, let people know who you are. You have been on this series before. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that as well. But yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are, where you are, what you're working on, and then we'll get into tariffs shortly.
Sure. So my name is Sherrill Mosee, and I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And my background is engineering. So I used to work for a big aerospace company in the region for many years. And I was laid off. And when I was laid off, I always had this dream to support young people. So I started a nonprofit organization that helped low-income single moms in college pay for childcare. And I would see the moms come in struggling with their diaper bag and their book bag. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm taking the train in the city and I'm going to work and I'm carrying two or three bags. I had my shoes in a plastic grocery bag, and then I had my lunch bag. And well, women, we like to carry a lot of stuff. And so I am now known as the bag lady. As a matter of fact, if you catch me at the airport, a few years ago, I was at the airport with my husband, and this woman, she couldn't remember my name. And she yelled out, "Aren't you the bag lady?" And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. I'll take the bag lady because to me it was all about branding at that point. But I was carrying a lot of bags, and I looked around on the train and I saw a lot of women carrying two or three bags. And so I said, it's got to be a better solution out there where I can organize and separate my shoes or my lunch in a bag and have the same bag and carry my purse essentials. And when I couldn't find anything, I said, you know what? I do have an engineering degree. I think I can figure this thing out. And so I put a shelf right in the middle of the bag. And I'm just going to show you the shelf. It's probably easier for you to envision if I just show you the bag. So at the bottom part of the bag, I have my lunch bag. So you no longer need to carry a separate lunch bag that comes right with the bag. And then here, when I'm not using the lunch bag, I have my shoes and purses, my shoes and change of clothes in there. And then on the top part of the bag, there is actually a shelf here. And this is where I have my patent. So this shelf separates what I want to carry, my purse essentials, my laptop here, my shoes or my lunch at the bottom. My shelf separates that. And if I want to use the whole bag, I can unzip the shelf and then open it up. And so I have two utility patents on the bag, and it has been a wonderful journey, a lot of challenges, I must say, and we could talk about that later, but a lot of successes as well. And I'm happy to share that. But that's the origin of the story.
Right, you didn't even mention the name of the company, by the way,
Ah,
Sherrill. I
oh
mean, it's right
my
there. I mean, it's right
God.
there behind you, but maybe you want to give a little plug.
Minky Blue. Minky Blue is the name of my company. And I will say, some people say, well, how did you come up with that name, Minky Blue? And I mentioned I started working with single moms, and I started off making diaper bags. And I wanted the domain Pinky Blue. It made sense, pink and blue. And but the domain was taken. So I literally went through the alphabets. And because I like the sound of Pinky Blue. So I went through the alphabets and I said, Linky Blue? No. Kinky Blue? No, that's a whole nother business. And I just literally landed on Minky Blue. So that's how I came up with the name.
Awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, that was a perfect introduction. Thank you so much. Let's turn to our second speaker. Ori, let me just find you. And Ori, maybe you can give us, again, not tariffs yet, but maybe you can give a little background on who you are, your company, what do you do, and how it all began.
Yeah, thanks, David. And so my name is Ori Zohar. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Burlap and Barrel. We're a single origin spice company, a social enterprise, and we work to pay farmers a lot more money and import really incredible, really fresh, really high quality spices from now over 22 countries. We have over 100 spices. Most of our business is e-commerce. We can talk more about that. But like basically our model is it's happened in coffee and tea and chocolate. We love single origin. If things come straight from the producer and the producer gets paid more, we get transparency, we get freshness, we get really incredible farmers growing really special varietals of the spices. So we're just bringing this kind of single origin direct trade element to the spice world. And what ends up happening is it's kind of a win-win where the farmers get paid more, we get better quality spices, and also all these intermediaries that often just add costs but don't add value get cut out of the equation. So it kind of everybody makes more money and gets better spices in this whole process. We are turning 10 years old this October. So me and my buddy Ethan started this company 10 years ago. We had been friends for a long time. Ethan was cooking in kitchens. He had like this little kitchen over a tofu factory in Chinatown in New York. And I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I got to eat whenever he's cooking. We kind of built our friendship over that. In 2010, we started an ice cream business. So we pushed around the streets of New York. We donated all of our profits to the street vending project, street vending advocacy group. At the end of the summer, Ethan went off and got his master's in international development, and he'd also worked at some restaurants in New York, but he had moved to Afghanistan as an aid worker. And he started bringing back all kinds of incredible dried fruit and nuts and all that stuff. But specifically, this cumin that he brought back, his chef friends were like, oh my God, this is the best cumin I've ever had. Can we please buy this? And that was like a first light bulb moment. In the meantime, I had finished the ice cream business, went to my dentist for a teeth cleaning, and the dentist was like, oh my God, what have you done? I had 4 cavities. And so I realized ice cream was not for me. Um, and I went and started a VC-backed fintech company in Silicon Valley. My background is advertising and marketing and business and entrepreneurship. And so we had started this thing to guide people through this crazy mortgage process that nobody knows what points are, what goes into APR. We tried to do this in a transparent, customer-friendly way. But my experience, while Ethan was off doing aid work was this kind of VC, private equity backed, high growth, high investment, all that stuff. And then right when Ethan came back into the world, we'd always been talking about what we'd do next. But I was like, oh my God, this VC private equity thing it's too aggressive. It's too intense. Like it's not a good way to kind of build a long-term business, at least in the ways that I could do it. And Ethan came back from this nonprofit world saying, hey, I really wanted to do more and like build these like systems that actually help create kind of long-term economic value for the people in these communities that we're supporting. And so we both looked at each other and said, let's do a social enterprise, which is something kind of, in between with the values of a nonprofit, but with the kind of tools of a for-profit to be able to build this together. We started packing spices out of Ethan's apartment in Queens. I had to wash all of my clothes every time I went home. But we grew over the years. We started selling to high-end chefs and restaurants, which was phenomenal. The people that we had crappy packaging and all that stuff. But still, 11 Madison Park, the 3 Michelin star restaurant in New York, saw our spices and started buying them. That gave us a lot of credibility. We started growing. In the pandemic, our business really was at risk. We didn't know what was going to happen. And what ended up happening is all of our food service business went away, which was half of our business, but our home cooks started buying online and our business started growing and growing. We grew, I don't know, 5x in 2020 and then almost doubled again on top of that in 2021. So all of a sudden our strength was our supply chain. We were able to keep spices moving from around the world and our customers kept saying, what else you got? And so we added onion and garlic and cumin and incredible peppercorns from Zanzibar. We added honey that we just launched with the Jane Goodall Institute. We added salts and sugars, everything to give it this single origin treatment where the farmers get paid more, but we also get a really special, unique product. And then we went on Shark Tank in 2023, which was fun and silly and ridiculous, but we just kept growing from then and there. So now the latest kind of area that we've been kind of really outspoken and kind of active in is in tariffs. And we'll talk about that. But that's the history of our small social enterprise. We're a remote company. We're bootstrapped. And we're kind of still working hard to kind of build our business in this kind of like independent and focused way. And we still have a lot more countries to go to. We have a lot more spices to import. And we're also expanding we're doing some R&D on hot sauces and tomato paste and all kinds of stuff like that. So we're trying to see how far we can push it. But that's a little bit of our story. How's that, David?
Awesome. Yeah, I love that, Ori. Thank you. Thank you to both. Actually, let's stick on you and let's get into tariffs. So, what is that? What is the history of that in America? Maybe you could talk a little bit about, tariffs in general and then how it all changed,
So
and like what
tariffs
changed.
is, yeah, and happy to talk about this. I won't put everybody to sleep here, but tariffs historically have been used to kind of protect American industries in a way to kind of incentivize American business owners to buy more from domestic suppliers because they have to pay a fee, a tariff, a tax, if they buy from somebody abroad. And often these have been used in really specific and targeted ways. Like if the American steel industry, we see that some other country is, giving a subsidy to their domestic steel industry, and all of a sudden, all of American steel is kind of going out of business because all of a sudden steel from like China or something like that is half the price. Then tariffs can be used to kind of bring that price back up to kind of ensure a competitive environment. And tariffs have been around in America for a really long time, but they've just been used in very kind of narrow and specific ways. The headline of protecting American businesses is one that like really can work in narrow ways. But just to be clear, the importers, the people that are actually buying from other countries, if they do choose to keep buying from other countries, are the ones paying the tariffs. So it's not like China's paying the tariffs. It's not like Chinese manufacturers are paying the tariffs. It's just trying to make their pricing less competitive by having American businesses pay basically a tax if they choose to kind of import. With the current administration and with these tariffs, it's introduced tariffs in a really deeply unprecedented way. And that was the IEEPA tariffs. And IEEPA is an acronym that is the kind of act that this administration used to introduce tariffs under the Emergency Powers Act that basically says that if there's an economic emergency, the president can take drastic actions. And one of those actions that they interpreted as allowed was to say, hey, normally Congress, by the US Constitution, is the only government body that has the power to enact tariffs, to control the purse. Like that's Congress's job. And the president stepped in and said, listen, it's an emergency. because it's an emergency, I can put in these really sweeping tariffs. And what we saw is it was called Liberation Day. It was called reciprocal tariffs, but that was last April where they introduced these really broad ranging tariffs across the whole world. And remember, everyone even talked about even countries that were uninhabited, were getting hit by tariffs. So it was really this broad tool. And what ended up happening is all of a sudden, with very little notice, all companies in America that were importing anything had to pay tariffs. And so unlike these like very narrow, very specific tariffs that were used to kind of protect domestic industry, often by price manipulation by a specific country, all of a sudden it kind of blew open the doors. And we as a spice company found ourselves paying tariffs even on things that don't grow in America. So for example, all of a sudden we're paying 50% tariffs on black peppercorns from Vietnam, which doesn't grow in America, and cinnamon from Vietnam and Zanzibar that we bring in, which doesn't grow in America. And so it was this really blunt tool that had a really big impact. And then what ends up happening is that the importer pays the tariff, and then they have to pass it on to either their customers or the people like that. That has to come from somewhere, especially when there is no alternate. And with the tariffs going up and down and on, all this stuff, like it was really hard to plan. We had many shipments that were leaving countries under one tariff, calculation. And by the time they arrived in the US, there was a totally different tariff rate by the time they landed. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't know is that tariffs get pulled by the Customs and Protections Bureau directly from our bank account. So we don't choose to pay tariffs. There is an ACH pull that happens straight from our bank account on this stuff. So the combination of not knowing what tariffs are going to be, the combination of the government, being able to pull directly from us and not, us not having a chance to kind of prepare for them or engage with it, all that stuff is tough. The last part of this, and I'll wrap this up, but basically there's a company that sued in the Court of International Trade that said, hey, these IEEPA tariffs, this is not a right that the president has. This is an over extension of what the IEEPA kind of regulation said. The Court of International Trade said, yep, we agree with you. We should stop these tariffs. That got appealed up to the Federal Circuit Court. The Federal Circuit Court said, yep, we agree with you. That got appealed up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yep, we agree with you. And so those tariffs were made illegal. It was and now the government is in the process of refunding all these tariffs back with interest. They're paying a 6% interest on this stuff. And so we just yesterday filed in for a little over $100,000 of tariff refunds from what we paid under these IEEPA tariffs. But in the meantime, 3 hours after the Supreme Court decision came out, the government said, you know what, that's fine. We're going to put in tariffs under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which was a very specific, again, trade act that said, hey, the U.S. is moving the U.S. dollar off of the gold standard. In the situation that creates crazy devaluation in the dollar, the president can put in tariffs. But so this agreement said the president can do tariffs, but only under these very specific circumstances that again had a lot to do with the U.S. moving off of the gold standard, just situations that don't and can't exist today. So we, Burlap and Barrel, now sued the government against this second round of tariffs. So we work with a libertarian nonprofit law firm called the Liberty Justice Center. They were the same ones that sued the government for the first round of tariffs and won all the way up to the Supreme Court. And basically 3.5 weeks ago, me and my business partner, Ethan, showed up in the Court of International Trade in New York City. We gave our case against why we think that this was an over-interpretation of the tariffs. We submitted a brief with 50 global economic leaders that also agreed with this, and we're waiting to kind of hear the outcome of that. But what we're hoping for is that even if the tariff passes, this new tariff is just for 10% and it's just for 150 days as a kind of temporary tariff. Even if the tariff time passes, we're still hoping to keep litigating this, that if these are also deemed illegal, as we hope they are, and as we're arguing that they will be, that will still kick off a refund back to everybody who paid those tariffs. So we've been working really hard as a business, and I can talk more about how we've reacted to it, but that's a little bit of the history of the tariff. So there is still a tariff regime, and now the government is already commissioning studies for the next round of tariffs for when this Section 122 tariffs kind of expires, called the 301 tariffs, which require an economic study and are country specific. Anyways, that's the whole history here, but it's been this whole crazy thing. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it's been waves of tariffs, and that we as small companies don't really have giant bank accounts and giant lawyers and like all that stuff. We were lucky enough to partner with a nonprofit law firm that can represent us, because the cost of litigating a lawsuit at the Supreme Court is literally millions of dollars. And that by itself would bankrupt us. And so that's how we've been working with this and trying to kind of fight against it because ultimately we're trying to protect small businesses. I'm not here to tell you whether tariffs are good or bad, but I can tell you that these really broad tariffs without a clear sense of what they're impacting, what they're protecting, end up essentially acting as a tax on all US businesses that then either the businesses have to slow down innovation, investment in the US, employment, and all that stuff as we did. Or number two is they have to pass on the cost to consumers or shrink product quality or all that stuff. And Sherrill will tell you more also about how she's kind of, incorporated into her business. But just to say that that's the kind of overall kind of how tariffs work and why we're fighting hard against them because it really creates a new challenge and really hurts American businesses and ultimately pulls money out of investment in the US economy that otherwise we would have invested in the US economy.
Got it. That was great, Ori. You definitely touched on a lot of different things. We'll come back to some of that for sure. Sherrill, what's been your experience with tariffs? Before it got in the news, while it's in the news, just in general, dealing with tariffs, what has been your experience?
Yeah, so I've been running my business for about 13 years now. So when I first started the business, I was adamant about making my bags in the US, and I actually worked with the Department of Commerce to find manufacturers in the US. And while there are a few, we couldn't find anybody to do the details of what I wanted to do with the shelving and all of that that would be affordable. It was just too expensive. So at that point, I decided to manufacture overseas in China. And when I started, my tariffs or my tax was about 17%. So during the first Trump administration, he added on 25% tariff for my product and my industry. So I wind up paying like 47% after all of that. So and I was paying that for years, so it was still very expensive in addition to the cost of the product. So during the second round last year, I had just bought over product like the end of 2024. So in 2025, when this next wave of tariffs went in, I mean, it was crazy. It was between it was like 50% one day, and then it went up to 145% another day, and then it came down to 95%, weeks later. So it was crazy, and it's hard for any business to maintain a business because it was unstable, and it still is. You just don't know at what's going to happen with these tariffs. And so at that time, I made a decision because I was already paying these high taxes that I could not afford to pay on top of what I was already paying additional taxes. So I decided to pause my production, and I'm really just selling inventory that I have. I've just made the decision that I just don't have money like that to at the whim of a single person to make decisions on tariffs. And, thank goodness we're in this process of the government saying, or the Supreme Court agreeing that this was erroneous and that people should be paid back. But at this time, I just made the decision that I'm not going to go into production under this administration.
Yeah, that's a big decision. I mean, clearly affects your business. What type of did you do any type of advocacy like Ori um, while this was going on before you made the decision to stop production?
Yes, as a matter of fact, on the same day that Trump announced the tariffs at 145%, I was actually on Capitol Hill advocating against the tariffs previously. And I work with a group, the National Retail Federation, that does a lot of advocacy work, and not just in retail, pretty much with farmers and anybody who's paying tariff, as Ori mentioned, it hit everybody in every industry. So, yep, I've been involved in advocacy work with the National Retail Federation.
Okay, and Ori, I'm gonna put you back in spotlight with Sherrill because I want to get back to something that you talked about. It sounded like your particular business, they were taking money out automatically. Maybe just kind of talk about that a little bit more so people understood when did that start, and it sounds like it stopped, but now could it come back type of thing, you know?
Yeah, just for us to be registered as an importer, you have to register your bank account with the Customs and Protections Bureau. And so as things kind of cross the border and come into the US, they assess a duty, a tariff on your products, and they automatically just kind of pull it out of your bank account. And then you can dispute it later if it's wrong. And this happened for a long time. They actually just changed it for if you dispute it, they used to mail you a paper check. But in preparation for all these tariff refunds, they changed it to refunding you back with ACH. But it's been challenging to plan for. In late last year, in October, November, they added the kind of Annex 2 exceptions, which basically means they kind of took out a lot of things that aren't grown in America. So like all of a sudden we didn't have to pay tariffs on peppercorns and cinnamon and stuff like that, but we still we still pay a lot of tariffs on garlic, which we bring in from Vietnam, herbs, like dried herbs, like herbs de Provence. These are fundamentally different products than what we can grow in America, and there is no major domestic industry. And so the big thing for us is just that if you want to create a domestic industry and support American businesses, there are ways to invest in American industry and create these industries versus kind of penalizing American companies for bringing things in from other countries without propping up the domestic industry. So you're just kind of making both options expensive. And then ultimately that ends up getting passed down to consumers. So that's how we're still paying tariffs. We're still kind of subject to all of that. And we're expecting to get the refund in the next 60 to 90 days for the IEEPA tariffs. And guess where that money's going? It's going 100% back into our business to kind of invest in our supply chains, invest in our team and all of that. So I think these refunds are going to create actually a really positive economic movement in the US rather than kind of like these aren't going back to business owners' pockets. Like small business owners are struggling to make ends meet, as you're kind of hearing here. And so these tariffs refunds are going to actually, I think, be a really nice investment back in the kind of economy. What would have been the best investment in the economy would have been no tariffs, and that would have been less expensive for the government and for everybody involved. Just one last thing that I'll say on this is that there's a saying that by economists saying that prices rise like a rocket and fall like a feather. I think whenever there's uncertainty as a knee-jerk reaction, businesses increase prices. And then when that kind of uncertainty goes away, they don't just as quickly decrease prices. They kind of check and they make sure. And if they can maintain those prices, they do. But otherwise, prices kind of slowly come back down through kind of competition. And so this ends up creating long-term harm and long-term inflation for all the Americans. And so that's where we really wanted to kind of make our voice heard on this topic. And you're hearing two entrepreneurs here that have taken action, and we're not these like big heavyweights in the industry. We're not these like like we're building cool companies and we're doing thoughtful things, but the big companies have been surprisingly absent from the conversation, who have teams of lawyers and lots of influence and lobbyists and all that stuff. I think it's fallen up to the small kind of business owners to step in, and you've watched us do it, and it's been effective. And so that's just one of my that's my hopeful, encouraging kind of take on all this.
Yeah, which is great. So it sounds like if you were an importer, you got this automatic tariff that's about to be refunded. But if you were someone like Sherrill, it sounds like Sherrill that you were not necessarily considered an importer. You were manufacturing overseas, and those types of tariffs are still out there.
No, no, I'm still considered an importer because
Got
even
it.
though the product is made overseas, I'm importing it into the country. But I worked with a freight forwarder, so I paid the freight forwarder all of the fees and the taxes. So unlike Ori, I didn't have a direct um, takeout of funds from the government the forwarder took care of that, but I had to pay the forwarder. And so you have those extra fees to the forwarder.
Got it. That
Totally.
makes sense. That makes sense. And can you talk a little bit about the refund process, Ori? Is that something you have to like? Is it just going to be automatically refunded to you? Did you have to apply for it? Like, how do you get the refund back?
They created this portal with an acronym CAPE, which I can't tell you what it stands for. But you have to then go with every single import that you had. And for us, it was over 100 separate imports and shipments. And every single one of them, we had to apply for it, show the paperwork, say how much we're asking for, and all that stuff. So it was actually quite a heavy duty process. We also work with a freight forwarder to kind of help file paperwork. We just saw that it was easier and more straightforward for them to do all the paperwork, and they took 3% for that. So again, like it's just money that comes out of our pockets for the administration of getting money back that we should have been owed. And just to give you an example of like most food companies in the US, let's say you're buying tomato sauce, that company is probably buying that glass came from probably a company in China, a glass manufacturer that was imported to the US by a giant importer. They probably will get refunded the tariffs. The importer sells to like a packaging distributor. The packaging distributor usually sells to a co-manufacturer. The co-manufacturer usually sells to the tomato sauce company. And so just to say, like, we are much more connected to origin and to manufacturing. So we at least we paid the tariffs directly, but we also have the benefit of getting refunded. The tomato sauce company is the refund is happening 3 levels up from kind of where they're producing. And so a lot of states are saying, well, now that we're getting refunds, you should refund the customers that paid more. And it's like, well, this guy's to pay this guy's to refund this guy's to refund this guy. And then that can go and just throughout the whole way, it takes legal support, it takes accounting support, it takes administration, it takes all these other things. And so like I think that these costs aren't so simple. They kind of have to waterfall all the way back down. And every waterfall, somebody takes a bite out of it. And so that's where this becomes a really hard thing to get back into US consumers' pockets. And I think that's where the kind of long-term inflationary damage will come from all of this.
Yeah, for
Yeah, and
sure.
I just wanted
Yeah,
to add to
please do.
that because, talking about this, if you think about before all of this happened, we were able to focus on building our business and contributing to economy. And now we have this whole other thing that we have to worry about, stress out about, and it takes away from building the company. It's so much time spent on figuring things out and how to get the refund and what do you need to do. It's just a mess. It
Well,
really is.
yeah, well, Sherrill, on that note, so some of our viewers, listeners are small businesses, or are thinking about starting a small business. That small business involves working with outside of the United States manufacturers, production, inventory. They need something outside the United States. What advice, and I'll have this same question for you in a minute. What advice can you give them in this moment? And I know we know that you've stopped production, but even with that, what type of advice can you give someone that's looking to do business outside or looking to do business outside the United States to benefit the United States, like to bring it back, if you will?
Yeah, I would, you really have to figure out your costs. I mean, the way things have been going over the last year, there are some countries that have, of course, lower taxes than others. So maybe doing the research and finding out what the taxes or the tariffs are in other countries. But you have to know your costs before you jump in. Like when I started this business, I was like, oh, I'm going to manufacture in China. I think a lot of people not knowing how much it's going to cost. Like, this is my idea, my dream. This is what I want to do. I'll figure it out as I go. You can't do that now because you don't know what you don't know and what's going to happen. So you really, really have to understand what your costs and then give yourself room because we don't know what the administration is. So the bottom line for me is that I'm just waiting it out. But if you want to pursue, you got to really know the cost before you jump in.
That's actually, Ari, I'll come to you in a second. That's excellent advice. I know I know you mentioned the Department of Commerce. If I'm not mistaken, they did have some tool years ago, the ACE tool, Assess Costs Everywhere. Is that something that's still around, you know? Like, how
Well,
do
when
you
I
assess your costs, you know?
Yeah, when I was working with the Department of Commerce, it was under the Obama administration, and then I had a point of contact, and they would
Sure.
call manufacturers in the U.S. and set up meetings with the manufacturer. They don't do that
Yeah,
anymore.
people don't work for the government anymore, is the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, got it. So now it's just what? You just kind of do it yourself or find a
Yeah, I don't,
consultant that can do it for
I
you?
don't know what tools. I'm sure there are some tools out there, hopefully. But I don't know what tools to refer people to offhand right now.
Okay, no, good to know. Ori, what do you, the same question to you. What kind of advice you can give to people looking to do business overseas for the benefit of the United States?
I think one of the things that we had realized in this whole craziness over the last now, basically, we just passed the 1 year anniversary of the kind of IEEPA reciprocal tariffs. One of the things that we realized is that we are flexible in a way that big companies are not. Like one of our strengths is creativity and flexibility and brainstorming and all like and so big companies, they're locked into these huge agreements, they're locked into these like huge relationships and production and like it's like a giant boat. Like it takes a ton of effort to be able to turn it even a little bit. But us as entrepreneurs are like speedboats. Like we can kind of turn on a dime and kind of run circles around them. In the early days of Burlap and Barrel, all of our packaging, we bought essentially dead stock packaging. There was a place that was packing our spices, and they just had some overstock of some packaging that they didn't need. And so we're like, we'll buy it from you, but we want a reduced rate and we want to buy it just as we use the jars. We were really able to, as things became more expensive, we also like added more blends in the US because for us blends are like higher value added. So like people want to cook with like they'd rather buy one jar of a blend than all this. So we just kept trying to be kind of crafty and clever on how we kind of build our business. Totally agree with like you really need to control your costs. Don't go for like savings by buying like a full container full of whatever because you think it'll be good. I've seen companies go bad that way. I think it's more look for opportunities because we can't both pay more for our packaging and pay more for our spices and also pay Whole Foods, you know, the money that they want to keep us on the shelf and all that stuff. So it kind of forced us to get a lot more clever and creative. And so we emailed our customers and we let them know where we were at and we kind of asked them to like show up for us and buy gifts. We did our first ever sale. We also said that we weren't going to increase prices, and that was really tough, but our customers really responded well to that. And so we got pretty creative on what is our product, what are we offering, how can we make one where we have better margins on it? How can we buy packaging at a lower cost by maybe some packaging that somebody bought too much of, and now we can get it for a fraction of the price? We called all of our we buy corrugate for boxes in the U.S. So we called all of our corrugate suppliers and said, hey, can we renegotiate? We're a bigger company now. So we did all of these things to kind of get crafty and clever about it, to kind of find places where we could kind of do something that was both delightful to our customers and also wasn't going to kind of be the kind of regularly scheduled programming of our business. So we didn't stop buying spices from our partner farmers. Our herbs de Provence comes from Provence. Our Vietnamese cinnamon comes from Vietnam. Those were things that we saw we just absolutely couldn't change. So we said, what can we change? So we found ways to save costs. We found ways to be creative. We found ways to lower our costs on packaging. But I think that that was like, we saw this a lot in the pandemic too. When you like saw a lot of like high-end restaurants were like, nope, we only do high-end in-person dining. But the clever chefs that were like, all right, we're going to build a to-go program and you're going to get the best cheesesteak of your life that we would never in any other situation make. Those people really grew and really built a claim. So I think it's a lot about kind of creativity and ability to kind of pivot based on what the situation is, given that that is our strength as entrepreneurs versus the giant companies that takes them 5 years to do like a teeny tiny label change, you know, on whatever they want. So I think that's our strength.
Yeah, I think you said it best there. You got to be crafty, you got to be entrepreneurial, right? You have to pivot and you have to make it work for sure. For those that are listening that kind of want to get involved and try to help you, let's say, like help small businesses, help themselves even, what can they do? What's left to do at this point? Is there any sort of advocacy or is there any sort of like, protests or is there any sort of like legal actions they can join? Maybe you can both kind of break that down a little bit if there's anything, or we can start with you.
So I think that a lot of people a lot of companies are trying to hide what's going on. And you know, like even like when you come to like a company and you get an email and they say, "Hey, we will respond to your question within 24 hours, a member of our team." Like we always wrote this stuff like saying, "Hey, I'm Ori, I'm the co-founder. I'm going to personally email you back, but give me a day." And so I think that like being honest with your customers over if you do have them and you're at that phase, let them know what's going on. Like they'll really show up for you from the community, from all that stuff. I also think that customers really like, I think people underestimate how valuable your purchasing is. So choosing to buy spices at a company like Burlap and Barrel versus at your grocery store has a massive, massive impact on our businesses. And I think oftentimes it's not at a like you don't have to like start flying in crazy things or spending 3 times or 4 times the amount that you'd spend on these things, but it's about choosing which kind of companies you support because your dollars go really far. And I also think that like it's been surprising at how few of the like Fortune 500 CEOs have taken up stance and spoken out. But I think if public sentiment is vocal and loud and against this and all this stuff, like I think that it will be heard. I think it just has to come as a groundswell from the bottom up because it sure as hell isn't coming from the top down. So I do think that like just speaking up, giving advocacy, talking to your local political leaders, supporting companies that are taking a stance in this is all really, really powerful and will get heard there. But I think that a lot of people are feeling pretty kind of powerless and frustrated and financially strapped and all of that. And that's totally fair. So if you're a company, talk to your customers, tell them that you need them to show up for you, ask them to share and send gifts and spread the message. And if you're a customer, try to find companies that are kind of doing things the right way because the most American thing is to bring in spices from other places in the world. Like apple pie is made with cinnamon. You know, we all have vanilla ice cream. Vanilla doesn't grow in America. Anyway, there's all these things here that like I think you get to really vote with your dollars, and it has I think a lot more of a impact on small businesses than I think most people estimate.
Yeah, I love that. Sherrill, Carol,
Yeah,
we'll
and
get to you in a second.
yeah, I would go and talk to and meet with your representative. Let them know how tariffs are impacting your business or what's going on in your business. And they need to know that so that they can make their case and talk to other folks. So definitely be the voice, as Ari mentioned, and speak up on your behalf and on other small businesses' behalf.
Awesome. By the way, if anybody has any questions for Ori and Sherrill, now is the time. Let us know. Carol, you raised your hand, so let me hold on. Let me ask you to unmute. Let me spotlight you, and maybe you can ask your question live. Good to see you, by the way, Carol.
Thank you so much. Ori, I shop at Whole Foods. How do I find your spices? Because I really, rather than order online, I'd rather reinforce the interest in the stores that I shop at so that they carry the products so I can do my shopping all at once as opposed to buying, one thing from here and another thing from there.
So where do you live, Carol? Out of curiosity.
I live in Dutchess County in New York
Okay.
State, but I shop in
Yeah.
Westchester County a lot
Okay.
because they
We've
have
been
more
doing a lot
selection.
better. Yeah, we've been doing better at kind of small specialty independent. Some of the Whole Foods do have our spices, only three,
Okay.
unfortunately. It's
Oh,
been a kind
okay.
of treacherous path over there to kind of all those big grocery stores, including Whole Foods, are tough to get into, and a lot of
I'm
big
sure.
companies
Yes.
are kind of paying their way in. And
Yeah.
so, honestly, ordering online is still our absolute favorite. But if you have any specialty stores that are smaller grocery stores that bring in specialty wine and cheese and all that stuff, as you go in them, and if they don't have our spices, feel free to talk to the person behind the register and tell them that you'd love it. That would be really helpful. But overall, if you shop with
Okay.
us, you all can use the code. There's a code that I have called Friends of Ori. That's 20% off. Friends of Ori, Ori. Feel free to use that if you ever want to shop on. We just have over 100 spices there, but we're working very hard on getting into more grocery and retailers. But as you can imagine, it's just oftentimes they want freebies and hundreds
Yeah,
of thousands of
I know.
dollars in
I was in
promotion and
the
all that
venture
stuff.
capital arena back in the 90s, and at
You
that
get
time
it.
it was $25,000 to get shelf space. I'm sure it's gone up from there.
It's gone up. We do sell on Amazon too, but honestly, the best thing for us is if you become a direct customer on our website, we have the most spices, we have the best prices, and we love that, and we'll mail stuff to you pretty dang quickly.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Great question. If you have more, just chat it or raise your hand. Sherrill, maybe you can let us know. I mean, we know you're selling off your inventory, but where can people buy your inventory right now? Because we want you to make more bags, and so we probably need to sell the ones you do have in order to get the bags up. So where can people buy Minky Blue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Go.
it's minkyblue.com, and I'll put it in the chat as well. But you can also buy them at Macy's. They're available at Macy's as well.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about like what does the horizon look like for you? So we know that the tariffs have, stopped your production. It's great that you still have inventory to sell. What does the horizon look like for this particular company?
So I've been dabbling and working in AI and using AI to support my business with a lot of different initiatives to help sell the bags, to automate systems in my business. And I've branched out and designed an app to help people learn different AI tools, and it's called Lizzie Teach. So I've incorporated AI in my business and expanding that way. So it's just very exciting. And I'm hoping in a couple of years I can continue with production. Right now, I'm looking at other countries outside of China. I've been sampling with Thailand and Cambodia. I did some samples with India. So just taking this time to figure out where else I would like to go, which has been nice. So, and when you're doing manufacturing production, things usually move quickly and you got to go fast and you got to make some decisions. And so now I can really work on designs and think through the process for another 2 years or so.
Love that. Okay, that's great. That's good that you have that runway. Ori, same question. What is the, what does your company's horizon look like now? What's next?
So we're expanding our lineup. We're continuing to go into more like just so you see like these are our regular kind of jars of spices, royal cinnamon. This is the best selling. This is almost like 10% of our revenue is the cinnamon, this Vietnamese cinnamon that's really sweet and spicy. We're getting into more and more blends. We're working on an everything bagel seasoning. We're working on a kind of like Italian seasoning. We're kind of getting into more stuff like that because we've heard from people saying, thanks for individual spices, but I just want to spend $10 on one thing that just will help me cook better. And so we've been doing a lot more of those kind of like blends. And it's a little bit like with like a wink because these are all American blends that are all built on ingredients that don't grow in America. And so it's like a little bit of the irony there, but we're working through that. And like, so we just launched a sumac lemon pepper. We just launched a cinnamon sugar crunch. We just launched so we're kind of trying to keep expanding, but we're trying to, I think, soothe a population that's stressed out, that's overworked, that's trying to cook more at home, that's financially strapped. Like, okay, fine, you don't need to buy 8 jars of spices to kind of make these blends. We're going to make a few of these like 1 jar blends that just are really easy to cook with and are really delicious. And so we're continuing to build the business and we're hoping to get a result also from the Court of International Trade any day now. They're not on any requirement to kind of respond, but we're hoping to get some good news from them. And then if so, it'll likely get appealed to the circuit court. And if we win there, it'll likely get appealed to the Supreme Court. So that's just a really interesting process. David, you probably have been in courtrooms and understand the legal process in a different way. But I had never been in a courtroom before in an active lawsuit like this, so that was a big way to start. But we're trying to make a lot of noise around this, and really trying to make the point about how America could be friendlier for small businesses, versus a kind of hostile environment with all this stuff. So that's what we're doing. More spices, more origins, more innovation. We're working on a cinnamon extract. So you could just kind of drip a little bit of it. It tastes like Fireball. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we're working on some new product development too that's going to come in because the holidays are really our peak season. And so now is when we make all the plans for that. So we have a lot of cool stuff coming out. And we're just going to try to keep putting every dollar that comes into the business back into growing the business because that's what we need right now.
And so that's awesome. And Ori, what is the desired outcome of that federal case that's happening right now that you're involved in?
So this is a funny lawsuit because there's not damages. It's not like a
Right.
regular lawsuit. This is like us versus the US federal government. And if
Hmm.
we win, then the law changes. Like we don't get anything. We don't get like it's kind of where it's a lawsuit that's kind of on behalf of American businesses. But it's not like a regular court where like if we win, they cover our lawyer fees and they da da da
Right.
and we get $1
Right.
million in damage. Like it's not that kind of lawsuit. This is purely if we win, then the law changes. And so we're going to try to push this as far as we can to make these tariffs illegal and hopefully trigger another round of refunds to small businesses because we need it.
Right. And if there are small businesses that are listening that want to join the lawsuit as a party, is that something that can happen or not really?
So right now, the way that this court does it is that they kind of collapse all the cases behind one case. And because we
Got
were
it.
the first to file, we're kind
Got
of
it.
representing all the other small businesses.
Very cool.
If other businesses share this and make some noise, and I think like Sherrill said, like your Congress people, your senators, like they're listening, they're watching, they're paying attention. And so the best thing that you can do is help us amplify that lawsuit. If you're on LinkedIn, I post a lot about the lawsuit there. You're welcome to join us on social media too and follow along. We'll give updates there. But we're trying to kind of make a lot of noise about this because we're standing up for this. But it's not just for us. It's if we win, we will get the tariff refunds, but so will everybody else. And so that's what we're trying to kick off.
Love that. There is a question. I think I maybe understand it. GL, thank you for joining. Good to see you. Do you want to ask it live? Because I'm not even sure I understand it unless Sherrill and Ori do. Can you ask the admin to remove small and medium businesses that are 5 years old and income less than a certain
Yeah, I
amount?
think
Yeah.
I think the question is saying, hey, should these tariffs be narrower and more specific and more targeted? And the answer is like absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Like you're totally right. There's so many ways. It even took the administration like 7 or 8 months to exclude things that can't be made in America from the tariff list. So this has been always like this, just like kind of broad tool to kind of apply this. And there's been so much collateral damage. So you're suggesting I think, very good idea, very clear idea on how to make these tariffs be less harmful to small businesses. But the administration so far, like we're like anyway, has not had any nuance. It's been really like what is
All
it?
or
I think
nothing. Yeah.
our director of
Yeah.
operations said that it's like using a samurai sword to perform surgery. It's like, oh
Perfect.
sure, sure you might be able to get it
Exactly.
done, but it's going to create a lot of damage. And so no, you're 100% right. But this is exactly the kind of I think common sense that has been completely absent
Yeah.
from this administration. And oftentimes the carve outs that happen are not small businesses, but the big businesses that send the president a golden blah blah blah. You know, they get carved out. So it's been actually quite the opposite. Small businesses have been paying more of the tariffs than big businesses. So that's been frustrating.
Sherrill,
Yeah.
any
And
comments? Yes, please.
I wanted to add, I am not against making any product in the US. And as a matter of fact, it would be much easier for me if I could make it here. And I always said that, if we're going to do this, then let's invest in manufacturing in the US. That's the thing about it is that the government is collecting all of this money, but what's coming back in to build manufacturers and do all of the things that we need to do to keep the businesses here? So that's my thing. Take that money and invest it here so that we can make our products here. It's just that, especially in the garment industry, the manufacturing left here years ago, decades ago, and so we got to start bringing that back if you want people to stay here. But at the moment, there's not a lot of garments that are made in the US or accessories. Of course, there are manufacturers, but not nearly as much as you would see in other countries.
Yes, that's awesome. And GL, thank you for the question. Ori and Sherrill, thank you for the answers. I don't know if we have any more questions, but maybe the two of you can just leave us with some last words. Sherrill, we'll start with you. Maybe just something that if we didn't cover something or you just want people to know, we'd love to give you some last words here.
Yeah, I know that this has been a hard year or so, but I think people should really just take this time to continue with their dream. Don't allow things to kill your dream if it's something that you want to do. Just be more strategic and more patient with the process. So really just take this time to build out what you want to do. Always look into the costs and look inside the US. There's a resource that's called I didn't it's coming to my head now,
Good.
Thomas Net, which is a manufacturing resource here. You can go to Thomas Net. I think it's thomasnet.com, I believe, but they have a listing of a lot of US manufacturers here. So you can look at that company as well and take your time with it, but continue on.
Yes, I think you and Ori are definitely examples of just, persevering and getting through this in any way you can. So thank you for that advice. Ori, what do you think? Just last words, possibly things we didn't cover, anything you want to share?
Well, I just want to share that like American small businesses are the engine of the economy and will continue to be the engine of the economy. And so like the job that we're doing is important. We're employers, we're investors in the local economy. We're doing all the right things that has historically been the source of strength for America as a world power. Um, I have found that constraints lead to the best ideas. And so, in my last company, we raised over $30 million. We solved everything by throwing money at it, and we ran out of money, at some point. Like, we never really solved the core problems. One of the strengths of Burlap and Barrel is that because we didn't have investors and because everything was from what me and my co-founder were putting into the business, we turned down so many opportunities that I thought would have been great and instead got really creative about it. And so that level of constraint has led us to really clever problem solving that has really built the engine for our businesses and has only made us stronger. So even when the tariffs are lifted, we're still going to be a leaner and meaner business. And so just to say that I don't know, we viewed it as a challenge. Obviously, it's not. It's a challenge that we'd rather not have to deal with, but it led us to kind of really understand our product costs, our supply chain, where we can save money, where we can't, and that ultimately has made us a stronger business. And then the other thing that I'll say is that events like this and just like other entrepreneurial communities have been so valuable. It feels like you're going through this by yourself and that you have a unique set of problems. But like the more I talk to other entrepreneurs, the more we're all trying to figure out the same stuff. But like we might be really good at e-commerce. Somebody else might be really good at wholesale. Somebody might be a just like brilliant manufacturing mind. Somebody might be a really strong, I don't know, like influencer and social media person. And so just to say that there's many ways to win and some of these communities like this event and like the community you've built here have been really, really valuable to kind of getting new ideas and to finding ways to support each other because getting into Whole Foods or Costco or whatever everybody thinks about those. Those are the most competitive things. But we got our spice into the Rancho Gordo Bean Club, which is an online bean seller. And because Steve, the owner, put our spices in the bean club, that made our year in this is in 2018, so a while ago. But some of these kind of like things that you wouldn't think about and some of these creative solutions ended up being these really engines for our business that really set us up on a good trajectory. Going on Shark Tank was a crazy way to get 4 million people to know who we were that didn't know who we were before and to make my mother proud. But just to say that we got really crafty and clever about all this stuff. And every time that we had these restraints, it kind of made us turn up our creativity muscles in all of this.
Awesome. I urge all of you to get in touch with Ori and Sherrill. They both have amazing backgrounds. They didn't even barely touch the surface of the things that they've done. They both have been on TV, but you can learn more about that. Do reach out to them. Do get active here. Do become a supporter of small businesses, even if you are going to be your own small business or not. I agree with you. It's all about community, which is why we put on these events. And so I'm super, super honored to have you both here. And again, thank you for everybody for attending. We really appreciate your time. We wish you much success and luck in the future. Good luck with the case, and let us know if you can what happens. And we hope to see you both back here in the future. So thank you everyone for attending. We'll be back at the end of May for sure. Look out for that. And good luck to everyone out there. We'll talk soon. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone.